Okay, it is 6:30, and welcome to week 3 of contemporary issues in criminal justice. That's the other class I teach, and I want to um, take a little bit of time today to go through the assignments, to give you some instruction and directions, to give you some details that can help you to perform well in your assignment for this week. So I'm going to just go ahead and get started by sharing my screen. Okay, and there we go there. And you, of course, know this home page. Of course, home page. And then let's go down, take a look at where we are in week 3. So, local ethics is what this week written assignment is about. So the criteria is describe the future of criminal justice as it relates to diversity. You'll get 15 points for that by doing a good job of that. Creates a deliverable for this assignment, sharing points to improve ethics in criminal justice, including demographics and their statistical data that is drawn from the local area. And then finally, satisfying the APA in grammar and organization, 5 points. So that's the written assignment for this week. And make sure, too, that you've done some research and that you haven't, well, you don't have a text, so you can't be concerned about that. But you have to do some research, provide citations and references, not just references or citations. And then reminding you the same thing, you have a rubric for the discussion post, and you pretty much know how I grade discussions. And the key thing is to be detailed, and certain things I like, I'll let you know, like references and citations. And also, I don't like very brief one-liners or just a brief comment, good post or something like that. It won't merit you any points. Then, of course, you know your initial posts were due last night at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, and your reply posts due this Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And I encourage you to reply to as many posts as possible. Not that you get extra credit, but it makes the discussion forum more interesting, gives you a chance to connect with your classmates, and helps you to learn about each other as well. The other thing is that this is our second lecture, week 3. We have 3 more to go. The next one after this will not be until week 6. So you want to make sure that you get the keyword. And it says at the end, but sometimes I give it intermittently, and then you'll be required to provide me with the keyword if you are not able to attend the lecture, because otherwise you lose points. Okay? And then there's a recording of the open house. If you ever want to go back and take a look at that and you can't find yours, then after today, there'll be one for week 3 under here as well. So let's take a look at the announcements for the week. Diversity. One of the critical transferable skills, diversity. We talked about that at length in the open house, but many of you have caught on to diversity as I have read some of your written discussion posts. And so this whole week is all about diversity in criminal justice. So read Module 3, and then this week there will be the lecture is taking place right now. And then I already talked about the discussion assignment, and make sure you participate in that. And then finally, be sure to complete the written assignment, local ethics. That's what I was just talking about a few minutes ago. And I gave you the parameters on that. And it's due this Sunday. And then start strong, finish strong. And I already shared with you adversity is the springboard to success during the open house as to why that's my motto. So let's take a look at the course calendar real quick here. Here we go. Okay, let's put the right one in there. That's the J150. It is this one. And then let's take out the J150. Okay, let's remove the J150. There, it's gone. Okay, so here's your calendar, and you can see where we are right now. We're right here this week, and it tells you exactly what I just told you a few minutes ago. It tells you your discussion post, your live lecture, and your reply post, and then your written assignment that is due on this Sunday, the 22nd, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. Okay, and then you have the same setup the following weeks. You follow that as well. Okay, so now let's go back, take a look at the module itself. Again, repeating to you what the assignments are. Move that up there. And it's a 1 to 2 page Word document. And the relationship between diversity and ethics. And I've already told you what the requirements are. And remember, when you're doing a 1-page document, if you choose to, be sure that you balance off your critical thinking. It is very easy to get a Grammarly hit for a high percentage of Grammarly in a situation like that. So it's really easy for you to get hit with Grammarly, and so you will find your situation such that you wouldn't be able to do anything about it, but you need to run it through Grammarly to make sure. So make sure that you run your papers because, again, give critical thinking. That's what I'm going to be looking for. Okay. And then your discussion posts, working with diverse coworkers and clients. And then, of course, your live lecture. Okay, so those are your assignments for the week. Now let's take a look at the course content as we go through and finish up. Again, the topic is diversity. I've given you your assignments already there as well. Okay, so this is not really a heavy module, but I will take a few minutes to talk to you about diversity, recognizing the fact that, as I've said before, that you work with people from various backgrounds. You live in a world of people that are multicultural. You're going to come into contact with individuals in your job. And certainly you must be able to be sensitive to the differences of various cultures. You must respect them. And actually, it's a giant learning experience for you to learn something about someone that you don't understand. Unfortunately, there's been too many um, assumptions about various cultures, various individuals, before you have a chance to get to know them. And there are people who have been raised in vacuum situations. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Going back to 1967, which was the period, and I was about 17 years old. I was at a church in the Chicago area, and we took a trip connecting with a church in a place called Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, near a place called Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And now a lot of people know Chippewa Falls because of Leinenkugel beer, and Eau Claire because it's the home of Menards. But at any rate, we went there to meet with some of the people there, and we had families that would sponsor us, and we stayed in their homes. And they were Caucasian, and we were African American or black. Well, I can tell you some of the things that we encountered. For example, they said, what do you people, and this is what the term they use, and you should be aware that that's an offensive term when you say that to actually, I know I'm speaking in terms of African Americans that you say it. It's a racial term as far as we're concerned, because it's not necessary to say you people, because it makes it seem as if you're from another planet or something like that. Anyway, it's a term that a lot of people don't realize it is a racial slur when it comes to African Americans. So anyway, while we were there, we heard that a lot. And then also they said, what do you eat? And, you know, we were shocked to hear that question. They were giving us beans and franks. Someone told them that's what we ate. Everywhere we went, they were giving us beans and franks. And so finally we said, why are you giving us beans and franks? They said, well, that's what we were told you people eat. I said, no, we eat a very large variety. What do you eat? And then they were shocked to find out that what we ate. Now, this was in 1967, people. So anyway, one of the most insulting things that happened is that the family whose house I was staying at, they were saying that they weren't trying to be offensive, but they wanted to understand, where did I hide my tail? I said, my tail? He says, I don't have a tail. And what it was is that that's the old racist thing that came out of evolution that said man evolved from the apes, and then said that blacks still have many of the features, and that we were considered as primitive, and that one of the features that we still had were tails. And I said, I don't have a tail. I won't show you either. Just take my word for it. Anyway, the truth of the matter is, this was ignorance, but it happened. And so they learned a lot about us. And so then we, in turn, invited them back to Chicago to stay at homes with us. And when they got to our homes in Chicago, and we took them on tours of the city, we took them to places like Old Town, when it was a very robust area. We took them all over, and they were shocked to see that we were like them and how many of us lived. We lived the same way, and some lived even better. But the point of the matter is that that little project resulted in people from different cultures and backgrounds learning more about each other. And as a result of what happened there, many of us kept in contact with each other for years and years and years after that. A few people actually began dating, and some ended up getting married, and now they have children. And now, at this point now, they have children who have children, or their grandparents. And so the point of the matter is that that's how you learn about people. And people do have certain things. I have learned this, that in law enforcement, from some seminars I have actually attended, that there are some Caucasian officers who genuinely are fearful of black people because they said black people have a propensity to commit crimes. And, that's a troubling thing if you're into criminal justice and if you're particularly in law enforcement. And point out, they say, well, look at all the blacks that are in prison and jail. I says, you need to look at some of the reasons why these things happen. You look at the reason why some of the things that happen in the communities. African American people don't bring drugs into the community. Someone sends it in from foreign countries and utilizes the individuals who get hooked on drugs, and there is a correlation between drugs and crime. I teach a course on that, which I'll be teaching in term 2 this quarter. And so anyway, the point of the matter is that that's just one example. And now there is a very serious issue concerning people from the Middle East. I saw a couple of things on Facebook that really troubled me. There was a scene where there was a husband, a wife, and they had a son, a daughter, and they were sitting in the waiting room of a doctor's office, and this young man who appeared to be from the Middle East, Arab ancestry. And anyway, the point of the matter is that they were looking at him kind of strange. And so the father sat between him, moved over and sat the child away from that person as if to protect them. So then the doctor's nurse came out and told them they could come in and to the office, and they were walking into the office, and and then the nurse pointed to the young man and says, "You come in too." Well, that threw them for a puzzle. They were confused. Well, here's what happened. That child had recently gotten an organ transplant, and you probably already know now. And so anyway, they asked, the family, how was the child doing with the transplant? Said, oh, child was doing good, and that they were happy, and they were hopeful of the child. And so they said, well, let me introduce you to, and they mentioned the young man's name, said, who is the donor? And the look on their face was like, oh, wow. Well, the point of the matter is that here's a person, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. And that people have to learn to understand and operate on the basis of accepting people from different backgrounds, different cultures. I was a young kid who came out of high school, wanted to be a lawyer, and ended up in a big Jewish law firm, and worked my way up to lawyer in that law firm through a number of years. But I was introduced to the tradition, what Yom Kippur mean, and Rosh Hashanah meant. I had an understanding about the menorah. I learned about kosher meats and all of those different things. I learned a whole lot. And I realized that there was really no differences in who we are. Because when it all boils down to it, folks, all of us, when we get cut, we have red blood. I know that actually it's blue, but when it hits the oxygen, it turns red. And I remind people that all the time. As I am involved with diversity inclusion at the college, I remind people at all times that we, particularly in criminal justice, need not be judgmental just because a person is a certain ethnic group. And again, it is so important. Just the other day, you guys heard this at a Starbucks that two African American men were arrested and put out of the Starbucks because they used the washroom or wanted to use the washroom and hadn't bought anything there, and that was a common practice at Starbucks for people to come together. And the men weren't doing anything. Well, you know what happened is that they were arrested because the manager of the store called the police. Well, the manager was subsequently fired and told that that was out of order. The police had done what they were supposed to do, so they didn't do anything out of order. But that person got fired, and as a result, there have been boycotts or threatened boycotts of Starbucks. And so in response to that, the CEO has come out recently and gone on nationwide TV to apologize and wants to meet privately with those individuals and apologize to them as well, face to face. And that now they just announced that on I think it's the 29th of May or sometime in May, that they're closing the corporate stores for a few hours to deal with diversity training. And I think, unfortunately, that situation turned out bad, but it's going to bring some good results. And maybe this is something that should happen at all institutions. I would say that one of the great things about Rasmussen College is that we, as employees, faculty, staff, all are involved in special training to deal with diversity, recognizing that people from all sex, national origins, and races. And so it is important, as I constantly say in the criminal justice field, to make sure that we don't draw conclusions about people as well. And there are so many communities throughout the United States where there are individuals from one group together. Chicago, for many years, has been described as one of the most racially segregated major cities in the United States of America. I think Boston is up there with them as all. But then there are neighborhoods that are there. And if you went into a certain neighborhood in Chicago and you were African American, it was a bad move, and vice versa. This is ridiculous. And so we have to learn to appreciate each other as human beings and respect the differences between people. And so the current state of the criminal justice professionals is that there is a movement now to try to recruit minorities to bring in, as Chicago is making a big move with that. Chicago PD is doing that. The fire department, I remember years and years coming up in Chicago, being raised there, that there were not as many minorities in police and fire, and that now that has started to change. Not to deprive individuals of other races, but to try to at least show some proportion of those that are served in the community so that they can see people like themselves as well. That's one of the phenomenal things about this movie that I went to see called Black Panther. There was some ruckus about the whole thing before it came out. You know, every time you say black something, people get alarmed. Says, why? When you say Irish something or Polish something, there is no issue. So what's it all about? You know, when I grew up, I grew up during the era of the right hand, Black Power, you know, and you'd hear that. Some people didn't understand that didn't mean violence. The term Black Lives Matters is not a term that has anything to do with killing police officers, white officers especially. It has nothing to do with that. And so people have to understand and know what it's all about. It's a pride thing. People should have pride in their ethnicity. People should be able to share their ethnicity with people of different backgrounds. And so I'm hopeful in the future that will change. Many lawyers, when I came up, I would go to courtrooms in certain areas, and the judges, and they would treat me like, I was the defendant. I, for example, represented a Caucasian guy in one of our way out suburbs years ago, and when the case was called up, he was dressed in a suit and had a briefcase. So did I. And I started to speak, and the judge told me to be quiet and let the attorney speak. And so I said, Your Honor, and he said the same thing again. So then I leaned over to my client. His name was Charles. We call him. I said, Charlie. I said, Charlie, you tell him. So anyway, he says, Your Honor. He said, yes, counselor. He says, no, I'm the defendant here. Boy, that judge's face changed totally. But he presumed. And I'm saying this to tell you that this also carried on in the justice system, but with on the bench. So in all areas, in the jails, in the prisons, and in the courtrooms, everywhere, the bottom line is now we are starting to address individuals based on not their character, not the the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. And so anyway, so we take time this week to bring to the forefront the fact that we all need to wake up. There needs to be special training in all areas of criminal justice to bring to the forefront and bring to the fact that unconsciously people are not just biased, all are biased. Bias has nothing to do with race. It just means you have a preference. But the point of the matter is don't let your biasness take you to a level where you don't respect another person. And so with a lot of the things that are happening across the United States of America involving law enforcement, particularly wrongful convictions, and just a whole myriad of things, there's plenty of room for improvement in the area of diversity. As I heard somebody say, it's not enough to be invited to the table, to the place where the table is, but it's actually important that inclusion involves having a seat at the table and the ability to be able to speak. And so we again, I have a book by my bed about diversity that we utilize in our professional development sessions over the last quarter, and also at our forum that we have annual forums. And one of the things that's important. So I am going to end this session, and I am going to make sure you get those assignments in. And the key word is the topic of this week's lecture, is the topic of this week's. And you have to give me that word. And I'm not going to tell you what it is, because you should know what it is by now. So, and that's how you're going to gain your points, to be able to know what it is. Okay? All right? So I'm going to go back to the classroom, and it's about 7 o'clock. This hasn't been very long. So I'm going to say good night to each of you. See you in a couple more weeks. Be mindful of the fact that the quarter is moving very, very, very fast. And say good night.